name is Tina Vejrum. I'm the chair of the Danish group of IABSE. We are a board of 6 people who are sort of managing our local national group, and most of them are also attending this webinar. So if you have any questions to the board of IABSE, I think we'll all be very happy to answer your questions. Just for your information, we are recording this webinar, and we're doing that in order to make it available to more people afterwards. We are around 30 participants right now. So we have 40 who have signed up for the webinar, but many more can of course benefit from the information and the knowledge shared by our presenters later. So therefore it is recorded, and I'll just share my screen and just give a few words to introduce before we start with the presentation. So I hope that, if I'm not messing around too much, that you can now see my screen.
We can.
Excellent. Thanks for confirming. Thanks for that, Sten. So today's presentation is about Skovtårnet, the forest tower, which is a very, very interesting structure located some 80 kilometers or so south of Copenhagen. We have 4 very knowledgeable presenters that I'll introduce in a short minute. We'll have approximately 60 minutes for the presentation, maybe a little longer depending on how enthusiastic we get along the way. And then we have allocated whatever time is left at the end for questions and answers. And I would suggest that you save your questions until the end, because the 4 presenters will cover 4 different aspects of the planning, design, and construction of the structure. So it could be that the questions will be responded later in one of the other by one of the other presenters. So in order not to interrupt too much the flow in the presentation, I suggest we save questions to the end. Please mute your microphones during the presentation. I think most of you have already done so we avoid too much background noise. After the presentation, when we get to the questions and answers session, I would suggest you use the raise hand function if you would like to answer a question. I'll keep an eye out for people who have sort of indicated that they have a question. If you can't get that to work, just use the chat function or simply unmute, and then if too many people speak at the same time, we'll try and manage it anyways. So as I said in the beginning, both the presentation and the questions and answers will be recorded. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our team of presenters today. First of all, the structure. Skovtårnet itself won the special award of the board of the Danish group of IABSE back in 2019. The award was presented in October last year. Because of the COVID situation, we had some delays, and we had hoped that it would have been possible to have sort of a physical meeting and an award ceremony. Unfortunately, that was not possible, but we managed to do things online like we are doing today. And at that occasion, the team kindly agreed to give us a presentation so we could get some more in-depth information about this really exciting project. So we'll start out with Kasper Larsen, who is business developer and representing the owner, Cap Adventure. Tue Fod, representing the architect's effect. Claus Jensen will give us some insights into the structural design. Claus is from Arup. And then last but not least, Levi Jensen, some aspects of the construction. So we look very much forward to your presentation, and I'll hand it over to you from here.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also thank you to IABSE for setting up this presentation and including the forest tower. We're very enthusiastic about that. Just very briefly, my name is Kasper Larsen, and I work as business developer at CampAdventure, and has been from the investor side, been handling all with the process of obtaining all the permissions, financing, and also being kind of the I can say the key person in relation to most of the architects and engineers, but also of course also the constructor. So I've had quite a lot of responsibility about the forest tower from the CampAdventure side, luckily we both have the architects, engineers, and the constructor amongst us, so I will not go into those aspects. We have the very experts present, so I will talk a little bit about the background for CampAdventure, the idea with the forest tower, and then a bit about the permissions and financing, and then also how it's all gone since we opened back in 2019. Yeah, so and see if I can change the slide. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so the background is that we kind of started CampAdventure as a project back in 2012. And our first kind of investment or aim was to open as a high rope course, which we did back in 2013. You can see down here in the left corner, down from our high rope course is very simple. It's that some wires spent between the trees, and then there are some obstacles and challenges. We have always been the largest in Denmark, and but it is a little bit of a limit kind of audience for it. It's not like you need to be any Superman, but you need to be a little bit fit. So we had a nice little business, but we also had the ambition to be something more and to be something for even more people. But we didn't, when we opened back in 2013, we didn't know what that should be. But then in 2014, in the summer, we find out that in Germany and other places in Central Europe, there's a lot of a lot of towers in the forest, and we went down to have a look at one of them in Rügen in northeast of Germany. And already when we are driving back to Denmark, we were quite convinced that we also wanted a tower, not like that necessarily, like the same shape and so on, but the same idea. And after 4.5 years, we could inaugurate the forest tower at our site in CampAdventure. And of course, it's been quite a journey, so that's what I will tell you about now. As you might have noticed, the design kind of and the PowerPoint has changed a little bit from the first one, because this is how our PowerPoints were looking in 2014, and this was what we brought to the local council in Faxe. We are located in the city of Faxe, or like the local municipality in Faxe. So that's our 1 hour drive south of Copenhagen. So that's like the local authorities, and you can say to convince them or kind of tell them that we should move along with this project, because it would need a lot of different approvals. We of course needed to convince them, and we had some really great ambitions already from 2014. And I guess you are familiar with those, but we found some inspiration in these places because they all, of course, attract a lot of visitors, but also maybe like have some of the same values or ideas as we would like to. I will not go that much through them, but in the top 3 ones here, they're all from Denmark, and we have Møns Klint here, which is of course like nature. So the idea about the nature being something as an attraction is itself we would like to work with. Then we had the Blue Planet, where you can say there's some connection between the nature, like the ocean, and both the shape of the building and also a little bit the choice of material. So we wanted to find some kind of architecture or design that kind of matched with the nature. Then we have the Space Needle in Seattle, which is kind of emphasized the kind of the very maybe human thrill or fascination about looking from everything from above. And then last over here in the left corner, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which is quite a, well, it's an example that's always used, but what is interesting about it is sometimes the kind of analyze about the Guggenheim Museum becomes a little bit kind of simplified, but you can say what's really interesting is that here you have some very you can say spectacular advanced architecture, a very particular building, and which has attracted a lot of people. So we believed in this about nature, the heights, mixing nature and designing architecture, and then making something very iconic and unusual. So that was kind of our idea all the way back in 2014. And at that time, we hadn't engaged with any architects or anything. So it's merely to say that this is kind of where we found the inspiration. And what is also very interesting, or at least about those international ones like Seattle and Bilbao, is that it's not the most kind of common tourist destinations in the US or in Spain, but they have managed to bring a lot of tourists and visitors to a particular area. So that was also a bit of inspiration for us, being located in a forest a little bit outside of Rønnede, that these places have managed to get a lot of visitors, even though they're not, as I said, like very usual tourist attractions. And then our next slide we presented, yeah, we kind of talked about the contribution to Faxe and the Southern Sealand. We would like to use the natural qualities Faxe and Rønnede is. We are in the nature, so it shouldn't be something kind of that didn't represent the settings. We didn't want to build a water sports attraction or something like that has nothing to do with the resources and qualities we found there. We want to be like a first mover of these forest towers. We have seen them other places, and then we were quite ambitious about the visitor numbers. We said, okay, we can have 200 to 400,000 visitors a year and create a lot of new workplaces. And we could also, of course, create some synergies with the rest of the tourist industry in Faxe. And then we had been a little bit funny because, at least we thought, because when one of the towers, in fact, the one we visited in Rügen, when that was inaugurated, it was the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who did the inauguration ceremony. And we also took the mayor at that time, the Hansen, we took his business card and then put in a tower. Of course, we had no idea how it should look, so we just made a very simple one. In fact, they have kind of the landscape as the watermark down in the bottom on everything for like email signatures and so on. So then we put it a big tower and to say, okay, this is also something that will make Faxe famous. So that was a bit how we kind of sold it to the local council, because of course one thing is that we would going to invest a lot of money and time, but they were also going to invest at least a lot of time in it. So we needed to convince them, and they were very positive, which was really nice. Yeah, and then well, I will just skip very fast to how it all went, because without bragging too much, we kind of succeeded, because here when we did the inauguration, it was also with the Prime Minister at that time in Denmark, Lars Løkke Rasmussen. We have reached the visitor numbers that we imagined it could attract, and we have also made, at least what we think, is an experience that takes a starting point in the nature and has a very high quality. We haven't made something kind of cheap or cheesy, which often tourist attraction, or sometimes at least tourist attraction is. And we also succeeded. I don't know, well, it's been a long time since I've been in the airport, but at least back in the end of 2019, when you arrived in Copenhagen airport, you could find big posters for what to do outside of Copenhagen. And then Haslev has been chosen out as one of them with the Forest Tower, which, without bragging, then I don't think it otherwise. If it wasn't for the Forest Tower, Haslev wouldn't have been there. I think it's fair to say. So what we kind of said back in 2014 we would like to do and success with, we have achieved that. So that's a little bit what I will go through with you. I said we found the inspiration in some different other forest towers around Europe. what we could see when we visited those towers were that we had a very broad range of audience for it. As said, we have mostly young, fit people at the climbing park, but here we could see both elderly people, people with small children, and people with wheelchair and so on. So we found that very inspiring, and then we traveled a lot and got a lot of inspiration for both what we kind of liked and what we didn't like. It is a very great experience, all of them. So it's if you come along, you should visit. But of course, there were some things where we thought, okay, here we could like to do it differently. You can see the one down here in the left-hand corner has this egg shape, and I've been there, in fact, also together with the architect too, and it looks very nice and so on. But it's a little bit weird in a way that when you end the trip, when it like culminates on the top, then you are in fact on the very smallest part of the tower and standing pretty cramped. So that's also a little bit how we got the idea to kind of turn it around and make a huge platform. And we can see the one here in Lithuania. That's where we got the idea for making it in steel. It's, to be honest, maybe not the nicest tower, but in fact it fitted quite well with some of the columns that were made in steel. So we have a little bit kind of got some inspiration from brought it back and kind of remodeled it together with effect, so we could get some ideas for it. But otherwise, we have done 3 parallel processes kind of at the same time. First of all, we needed, well, for making a success, we needed to develop a concept and design that would fascinate, receive a lot of attention, and also, of course, attract a lot of visitors. I will not talk that much about that because I think Tue will take that angle about the architecture and design. Then we also needed, of course, to obtain a lot of permission for it, because it is not at all possible to do what we have done. And don't worry, it's not illegal or anything about the forest tower, but it's not really in kind of in the legislation about what you can construct at all. And then also to find the financing, very boring, but of course we also needed to pay for it. And there were several challenges around the financing as well, both to find kind of a finance model for it, but also that it was pretty, we thought we had the best idea in the world, but the banks, they didn't really think that it was the best idea. So so that was also quite a challenge. So I would go mostly through the last 2 months about the permissions and the financing. As said, the authorities, they had to, as I said, break the frame. So like they needed to do something that they don't normally do, because it is really not allowed in the regular legislation. We made a local plan for the entire area. You can see here. You can follow my mouse. And then we have the reception up here. We have the high road course here, and then down here we have the tower. So that was so we have in fact only used a little bit of all the land that is in the local plan. And it was a challenge for all of us, but especially also for those working at the city of Faxe, because they couldn't really look at other places, how they had handled this kind of in terms of local plans and planning in general, because it hasn't been built before, and we had to kind of find a lot of phrases that hasn't been used before. So it was a huge challenge for those working with it. We also had a Rampel to do the local plan together with us. So so everybody had to kind of use their imagination a lot and kind of find some new ways of doing things. The forestry law in Denmark says that kind of more or less all forest is preserved. It's not preserved in that way that you can't cut it down, the tree, to make some wood out of it or whatever. You just have to plant a new tree, but you can't build any constructions in a forest in Denmark at all. And there's only 2 examples before us where they've actually been given a permission to build a construction in a forest. And yeah, we started back in 2014, and we first got the permission in 2016 from the nature agency who are managing the forest law of Denmark. And to be honest, we had an okay feeling about that they would grant the permission, but we weren't sure. And that time we had already used 2 years on working on this project and applying for permissions and so on. And I had probably used 80% of my working time only about the forest tower. But that is kind of course, the risk you need to take. But they granted the permission, and it was, you can say, there's nothing in the forestry law about tourism and so on. But there's some small phrases about kind of getting people out in the nature and experience. So we really hit hard on those aspects, and very, very luckily they granted the permission. And I've spoken later with them, and they weren't, to be honest, quite sure if they should give it to us. And if they had said no, there's like nothing to do. It's they are kind of the final authority on that. And also very generously and unanimous Faxe City Council, like the politicians, ratified the local plan. So that's where we got like all the basis for the permission. The financing, we also spend a lot of time on that. We don't own the land that we're located in, and that's also a bit tricky to receive loans when it's like that. We consider some different construction funds, companies, and so on, but we were also very marked on that we needed 100% ownership. Like we weren't interested in having other investors, not if we could choose not to have at least. Our own bank, they thought it was the worst idea in the world. We had traveled down to Germany and seen all these forest towers. We could see that they had a lot of visitors and gave some numbers and drawn some nice circles around our spot, Camp Adventure, and seen how many people live there, the income and so on. But they said we can't compare with Germany because there are more people living there. We tried to kind of argue that not all people in Germany live 1 hour drive away from these forest towers. We went to Lithuania where there lives very fewer people, but they saw that they also had a lot of visitors, but there was nothing to do. So we went around with all the big banks. We got introduced to Vækstfonden, which to the non-Danish speakers, Fonden means like a fund. It's not a fund at all. It is a bank, and they also want kind of their money back, in fact, with some really high interest rates. So we could receive a loan from them, but they also wanted like a regular bank with them. And we got Nordea then to also grant us a regular bank loan. But we talked with all the big banks in Denmark, and yeah, they kind of all refused until Nordea. So we have invested like the entire 2019 season, like 60% is all the money we have ever had, and also overdraft. And we also started selling tickets to be able to pay off the contractor who we will speak to later today, and so on. So we really used everything we had, and then we received 40% in loans. So yeah, as you can say, in financing as well, sometimes a little bit funny to make all these plans and so on, but it's also really like a showstopper, and you feel a little bit that it hasn't really anything to do if you have a good idea or not. And then we developed the idea. Many of the places, the other places have some high boardwalks, like in 15-20 meters of height, and they spend in fact like maybe 2/3 of their budget on that. We wanted to spend 90% of our budget on creating a really nice tower, and then we made a low boardwalk out to the tower and also back, and then maybe in the future we'll make the high one. So when you arrive at Camp Adventure and you want to visit the forest tower, you walk by the yellow path out, and then you have the forest tower here, and you walk back on the red path. And then maybe in the future we will get a high boardwalk to it, the blue path here. So that's how we have organized it, and also how we chose to spend the money. And as I said, I expect the two will talk way more about the design, so I will very fast forward to how it has gone since we opened up back in March 2019. We have received a lot of media attention. In fact, Visit Denmark told us we were the attraction Danish attraction who received the most attention in 2019. We have been all these both in big Danish media, international media, and so on. A lot of news about it. and also a lot of TV shows, music videos, and so on. And it's not like we are calling any of the media or TV shows, anything, they're calling us. So that's really nice. We don't buy any advertisement or anything. So we have been had a lot of attention granted that way around. We have also received some very, very nice reviews, both nationally and internationally, become like Times World's Greatest Places in 2019, the only Danish one that year. And we have had visitors from all around the world. Around in 2019, 10% were foreigners. Of course, last year was totally different due to Corona. But yeah, people from all around the world are visiting us. I think, yeah, we have the visitor numbers here. In 2019, we had just over 350,000 visitors, and last year we almost had 400,000 visitors. So it has been quite a success, and I think we are really, really good mark that if you can also bring tourists and visitors to the countryside of Denmark, and you just need to make something that kind of is really fitted well in and makes a really great new perspective, and you should use high quality architecture. At least that's kind of what I think are the learnings from the Forest Tower. So that was my presentation. I think maybe I used a little bit too much time, but yeah, I hope that's okay.
Thanks. So if I can get the control. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Footfall. I'm a partner in Effect Architects, and we were the happy consultant of Camp Adventure, who hired us to design the whole experience in the tower, which we are grateful of. It has been one of the most amazing and fun projects to work on. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the design idea behind it and experiences, and try to sort of give you an impression of how we did that. But first, I would like to just zoom out a little bit, just the perspective of why building a tower in the forest, and what is the forest in Denmark, because the forest is the real attraction that people come to visit. The tower is sort of the infrastructure that allows you to see it, and as it turns out, the forest in Denmark was almost extinct 200 years ago. And I mean, we have farmland, and now we're doing a little bit better. We're almost at 15%, but it's nothing if you compare to example EU, where it's almost it's much closer to half. So in Denmark we actually do have very little forest, but if you, for example, compare to what the Danes want to visit, and you look at the annual visitors of different types of nature settings, I mean, we do have an abundance of coast, one of the most per capita in the world, I think, but people they just love the forest. So if you look at the numbers, I mean, you can see it speaks for itself. The Danes really love to go to the forest. So naturally, the question was also, how can we allow people by the 100,000 in numbers to access this preserved forest without destroying the very nature they come to see in the first place? And at the same time, so this was the real sort of design challenge that we were faced with, and by designing kind of boardwalk and a tower that lifts you above the trees, you could sort of experience the whole thing without sort of roaming around in the forest bed and destroying all the microclimate and the protected and preserved water creeks and stuff around the forest. This is actually a sketch before it was introduced, as Casper showed you. Now it's a loop, so it's actually one directional, which fits perfectly with the Corona situation. So you can go out on one route and go back on another route to the tower. That brings you all around. And the interesting part is that when you kind of just build a simple organic path that follows the terrain naturally, people, even there's no railing, people still follow it and walk by it. It just feels natural. So this was one of the important design factors when laying out the route throughout the forest, that it was kind of organically, seamlessly following the sort of logic of the existing terrain and bending through in and out throughout the trees to create a natural path that people would just follow by themselves. And this was one of the reasons why the Nature Agency also allowed for so many people to be able to visit the forest at the same time. And as you go along the path, slowly the tower slowly kind of becomes visible throughout the trees. And of course, when in the summertime, it's much more hidden behind all the leaves on the trees, and it's kind of just sits there between the trees when you come closer to it. So I mean, the design of the tower, it's the client request was to design this viewing platform, as you just said, Casper. This people are really, fascinated by the view, and Denmark's very flat, so nobody has really it's not accessible at this view over a forest normally in Denmark. So this was kind of the design challenge to how to design this platform on top of the forest. And a cylinder is the natural shape to if you need to bring people up by a ramp to a viewing platform. A cylinder is of course a really natural shape to choose, but we wanted to kind of optimize the viewing platform to allow more people to have a good experience at the viewing platform, and at the same time that would also allow a more sort of larger diameter in the base when in contact with the foundations. And this gesture creates this really beautiful hyperbolic shape, which also seems to sort of bend towards the trees, bend away from the crown of the trees, and almost feels like a gesture towards the existing trees when you see it in reality. And inside the structure, we fitted the spiraling ramp, which is a continuous slope throughout the whole tower, that allows access to the top view platform that gives you the view to the observation deck, and is the whole structure that carries the spiraling ramp is the diagrid structure, which I will go into in a minute, and that together the diagrid structure and the spiraling ramp creates the full tower experience. And as you can see, if you jump back a little bit back and forth, you can see it just, this is the render from our design, and this is the actual image footage from the very place. And as you can see, it kind of just sits there and pops out in the surrounding forest area. And this is when you experience it in the summertime compared to when you experience it during the autumn. It really kind of blends in and gives various experiences depending on the time of the year, depending on the weather, and it really it's really interesting. I mean, even in a foggy weather situation, it gives a new kind of atmospheric experience, and it really kind of allows you to see the forest from a new perspective. It is a simple kind of idea of just giving people a very kind of designed route and experience throughout the forest, and a kind of vertical forest walk, you could say, taking you from the bottom of the forest bed throughout the crowns of the trees, and then up where the wind blows through your hair and you can sort of overlook the forest. And that is the core kind of idea of it. So the diagrid structure, this simple diagram shows you the idea of why we chose a diagrid structure to be the sort of design experience and also structural principle. It's straight circular tubes that is rotated 120 degrees, half in one direction, half in the other direction, still keeping them completely straight, which when you combine them gives the diastrid structure. And the structure in this project is of course the very experience. So it's the most key decision in the whole design. we built a full parametric model with Arab engineers, and this allowed us to really test a lot of designs and to choose the perfect kind of balanced model throughout the process. So we did manage to really do a heavy analysis on these and finding the perfect sort of choice of numbers of columns and diameter and rotation and to really find the perfect balanced model that also serves the right aesthetic experience. And in this image, if you can see the mouse over the screen, you can really follow from this perspective how the straight beams, when you cut them up, they're laser cut, welded together in the factory. And Livy will tell you more about the construction process, but this really shows how it becomes this magical double shaped organic shape, the hyperbolic paraboloid shape, the fun mathematical word, but that you can build that out of straight columns really is a magical experience, and that everybody seems to also get fascinated by because it really has this kind of almost resemblance to natural stuff you see in nature and shapes that are inspired by natural phenomena, which is kind of really inspiring to the visitors. Yeah, this is another picture where you can really see the straight columns and how the rotation and the angle sort of comes together and becomes an organic surface. Yeah, this is just a view throughout the structure, how it blends in with the spiraling ramp. Now, the spiraling ramp experience is pretty special, and I think we have seen before in early Russian constructivists, they used these sort of digrid structures to do water towers and stuff. So we've seen that before, but we've never seen a hyperbolic digrid structure with a spiraling ramp inside it. And the spiraling ramp is really what creates a lot of the experience when you visit, and it's creating the forest walk, the vertical forest walk. And as you can see in maybe not in this diagram, but you can see it in this drawing, which is an actual drawing from the project, where you can see that when you have a constant inclination on a ramp and you put it inside this shape, it compresses in the center and it opens up in the top and the bottom because of the constant inclination, and the width is reduced in the center, meaning that from deck to deck the distance is minimized, is sort of compressed in the middle and much larger in both ends. And that is a quite amazing gradual experience that really is quite amazing and gives this optical experience that when you're in the top and you look down through the middle, you can't see the bottom, and vice versa. So, and that is a quite amazing optical experience when you are there, that it's kind of just disappears underneath you. And we also managed to actually keep the trees alive. We were kind of hoping, but we didn't know if that could happen. But the good builders managed to keep the trees in the center safe, and so they are there today. So in the summertime, it's kind of even more magic that when you move up, you actually have the live trees inside it. And here you see it from the bottom, that when you look up, you can't see the top. So when you're entering the tower, you can't really see where it will end, and when you're in the top, you can't really see where you entered. So that's a pretty kind of thrilling spatial experience. So here you see this is an image from the spiraling ramp in the base. Here you can see it's pretty open, and what is kind of also this gives you this really nice experience is that the digrid is its kind of own structure, and the spiraling ramp is cantilevered from the digrid structure on a ring beam here, and all this that you see, all the ramp is cantilevered, so you really feel that you are hovering within the tower around these trees. This image is from the central part of the ramp, where the diameter is the at the minimal. So here, if you stand here as a person, you can almost jump up and touch the next level. And then when you continue up throughout the tower, it opens up and expands again. This is a view from, yeah, pretty sort of looking in the middle, and you can almost see the top, how it kind of organically opens up above you. And this kind of wide perspective image really shows you the experience of, so when you continue up, it kind of, the diagrid structure opens up and expands outwards, and the wind starts to, you know, over the trees really starts to blow in your face, and you can really feel the action of being above the trees, and you get this kind of vertigo in your stomach when you walk up the last bit of the ramp looking over the forest. And this brings us to the top platform, which is this 360 degrees view observation deck. And you can see here the small detail that it was one of the most tricky parts, was actually to fit the spiraling ramp has a constant width most of the time, but when we really needed to make this merge with the top observation deck, which was completely flat, and we needed to sort of seamlessly bind the spiraling ramp together with the flat top platform, which in order to make it sort of naturally merging, which was a really tricky design exercise, but we are really happy with the result of the merge between the two, because you don't really experience it as a kind of let's say break or anything. It really just merges. Here you see the top platform from a drone footage in the forest, and you can really see how you can see the top half of it, and the bottom is just disappearing under the trees and underneath you. Yeah, you see the top part of the power sticking up throughout the trees, and this is an image without any visitors. I think this was just at the official opening day when all visitors went home. Quite magic moment. It was just inaugurated and everybody was pretty amazed. We went up in a crane taking this footage, and here you can really see this seamless kind of merge between the ramp, going from an inclination of 7% sort of in the middle, and going to an inclination of being completely flat in the top. And it sort of slowly just steps down and really merges at this point here. And this is an image of the top platform. You can see the simplicity also of the materials. All the boardwalk is made of wood, oak tree, local sourced oak tree, PFC certified sustainable forestry, and everything else is the Coteng steel, weathered steel. So basically that's the two materials you experience. Of course there's the foundation, concrete foundation also, but you only experience these two materials. And the choice of the weathered steel really as a kind of color and ambience fitted very well with the forest, and also it doesn't need maintenance in terms of painting or sort of fixing. It can really take the punch of the weather and just stand there and looks incredibly beautiful in all types of weather and throughout the year in the forest. Yeah, here you see on an average day, lots of visitors. There's this funny thing that when you are walking there, I mean, even though there's a lot of people, you don't really feel overcrowded, and sometimes it's actually fun. I've been there a lot of times now. It's quite fun. You hear this, it almost creates an acoustic space within the forest where you hear people above you and underneath you, and it's quite cozy actually that there is other people when you walk there. This was the kind of thing we were really anticipating, like how will it feel with a lot of visitors. And you don't really, even though you're going up and down the same route, you're not really feeling annoyed by all these people around it, and that's a quite amazing. That it actually feels pretty natural when you are there, even though there's lots of people. And these are just some images zooming out, where you can really see the tower standing there in the forest, just popping out. This is a beautiful image from, I think it's a drone, from a drone photographer that really captures. This image just really captures the ambience and the feeling of how the tower fits into the forest. Just pops up, that sits there in the small clearing, and sort of merges very, very well with the existing surrounding landscape. I think that's kind of, yeah, what a quick run through the design, some of the design ideas and experiences. Thanks.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you too. I'll just see if the screen works. Right, so that seems to work now. Thanks to. My name is Klaus. I'm structural engineer in ARAB, and in ARAB we had the honor of doing delivering all the engineering services on the project. So first I'll start with something that Tue has already said a bit more into detail. It's the kind of the basic shape of the dagwood column. So we have these 36 straight CHS elements, which are rotated 120 degrees in either direction. And I think this picture on the right side is quite nice to get that magical feel. It's something we had in our office. So it's basically just a stick model with 36 sticks and then rubber band between them. So I can recommend doing this at home and getting one of these small models. Next up, we have all the structural components of the project. So if we start with the concrete, we have the concrete piles. On top of the concrete piles, we have a pile cap. In between the pile caps, we have the concrete ring beam, and then on top of the pile cap, we have the concrete plinth, which connects the steel structure with the concrete structure. And then second, we have the dagwood columns, as mentioned before, these weathered steel elements. To connect the dagwood with the rest of the structure, we have these small dots you can see here on the screen. These are the offsets, as we call them. I'll dig a bit deeper into them later. And then we have the ring beams. So the ring beams consist of this doubly curved ramp ring all the way up the tower. And then we have the platform ring at the top of the tower. Welded to the ramp ring, we have the cantilevers, which are changing in size from 2.4 meter at the bottom to 1.8 at the center, and then all the way up to 3.6 at the top. Finally, we have the handrail and the edge plate, which was all part of the detailed design and quite a project in itself. So just to start off, it's always nice to look at the global loads. Not surprisingly, when we have the tower under vertical load only, self-weight, for example, we get a full compression in the tower. And then when we get a horizontal load, like wind load, we get coming from the left, we get tension on the left side of the structure and compression on the right side. Now, when looking at horizontal loads, another important aspect is, of course, the stability of the structure. So this is really where the ring beam structurally comes into its place. So the first slide here is the deflection of the dagwood columns without the ring beam. And the next slide, in the next picture here, that's the deflection of the columns with the ring beam. And as you can see, when we push from the left, we get this ring structure where we have compression on the left side and tension on the right side, which is all causing this natural load distribution through the diagrid columns and giving this much more restrained structure. Next up, we have my personal favorite of the project. It's also one of the most complex element of the project, I would say. And it's also a good way to start looking a bit more into detail of the various elements. So if we look at this 3D visualization over here, we have the diagrid columns, which are an outer diameter of 457 millimeters. These have a splice welded to them, which is also 457 millimeters. And this is part of the offset connection. And then on the other side, we have another splice, which is then only 355 millimeters. And that's because the ramp ring, which is on the other side, is 350 millimeters in outer diameter. And this is then bolted together. At the same time, we have the offset connection is also where the various elements of the ramp meet each other. So these ramp come into sections. I think Levi is going to show this a bit better. But we also, where the ramp meets each other, we have another bolted connection. And finally, we have the cantilevers here, which are all HE sections. And in order to create this idea of architectural mythology that Tu mentioned before of a floating ramp, we needed to have a maximum height of the I-beams of 200 millimeters. And why this is especially interesting, we can see if we start looking a bit at how the moment from the imposed loads is distributed in the offset connection. So if we start having an imposed load, this is creating a cantilever moment, cantilevers of course, and then that's further distributed into torsion. The torsion is then further distributed through the offset connection and then into the diagrid columns as a major axis moment. So as Tu mentioned, this varies a bit from the original diagrid columns idea, you could say. So because normally diagrid columns would only have compression, but because we needed that cantilever, we also have a moment in the diagrid. And also we needed to make sure that we were addressing the right moment to be transferred. So we needed to do quite a lot of stiffness assessments around this offset connection. So in order to address the stiffnesses, we prepared some finite element models where we could then get the connection stiffness out and then use that as a equivalent spring stiffness in our global stick model, as you see here in the illustration to the right. So the example here, that's from the platform cantilever, where we have this tapered section at the bottom. The cantilevers are especially interesting when it comes to stiffnesses because they are all governed by serviceability. So in order to make sure we were getting the right deflection, to meet the right deflection criteria, we needed to address the stiffness of the connection between the cantilevers and the ramp ring / platform ring. Another interesting element of the tower is the whole transition from being a doubly curved ramp to a flat platform. As you see here on the picture to the left, the ramping concludes here, and the standard platform cantilever is starting over here. So that means in order to get this transition, we have a total of 7 different transition beams, which are all unique and non-standard elements. And the transition beams are especially interesting when it comes to the human-induced vibrations, also known as footfall. So when we have a thin and slender structure like this, footfall is, of course, an interesting aspect. I'm not sure how. I think a lot of you are aware of footfall in general, but it's basically how it feels when people walk past you. And I think the best example to mention is always the Millennium Bridge. So in Arab, we have this as part of our structural analysis software. So this is the output we get when we do a footfall analysis. And it's quite interesting to see how we get these peaks in response factors in the bottom, and then a large area in the top, and this is equivalent of where we have the larger cantilever lengths. And then at the transition, which I mentioned before, this is where we have the highest peaks. Next up, I just want to talk a little bit about parametric design. Tu was also mentioning this geometry generation through parametric design. And then in IABSE, we use it quite a lot for conceptual design, as I'm sure some of you also do. But during this project, we also find out that it was quite beneficial at later stages of the project. And at the same time, this parametric workflow kind of, in my opinion, really helped the collaboration between architect, engineer, and contractor. So on the right side here, we have the grasshopper model, which is all prepared in code. And this was the kind of the model that everyone used. And we could then use this model to create a structural analysis model and a Revit model. And we also made some AR models and for events and stuff. But also where the parametric design really came into its place was in the optimization studies that we did. So we managed to reduce some of the beam sizes in the cantilevers, but also maybe more importantly, remove quite a lot of offset elements. So this is the workflow of the optimization of the removal of the offsets. So if we start from the top, we start removing offsets, and then we need to go through all these steps to make sure that we are still meeting, we still have a connection that works, but we're also meeting all the global design criteria as deflections, buckling studies, ULS design, and footfall design. In total, we managed to remove 55 offsets. And so if you walk your way up the tower, which I find quite interesting, you'll notice in this light green area here that the offsets are not located every time the diagrid column meets the rambling. So this is where we've removed some of the offset elements. Furthermore, we were seeing that at locations we had an issue with the cantilevers welded to the ramp ring. So that connection was clashing with the offset connection. And by having everything in code, we could quite quickly look at this clash and make sure that that didn't happen, basically, by moving the cantilevers. So I just want to talk a little bit about the sequence. And again, I think Levi has some really nice on-site photos to describe this better, but this is just to say how this influenced our design. So the tower was erected, the diagrid columns were erected in parts of 3 with temporary supports. And then as soon as we had the platform ring in place, we removed all the temporary supports and started erecting these prefabricated sections of the ramp ring between the offset connections. So by removing offset connections, we also reduced the number of prefabricated ramp ring elements. Now, by having a structure standing alone without the ramp ring, this of course meant that we had another buckling length. We already had a global buckling assessment of the tower because it didn't really fall into any of the standard Eurocode buckling lengths. So we were already using this to find the elastic critical load factor. And as it turns out, the temporary stage with only the ramp ring in is actually the governing part for the design of the diagrid columns. Finally, I'll just mention a little bit about the concrete. So, which is basically everything below the steel structure. So if we start from the top, we have the load going into the concrete plinths, which are these inclined cone elements. And then we have the which sits on the pile cap. And then in between the pile caps, we have the concrete ring beam. And then we have the driven bearing piles underneath the pile cap. And what's interesting here is the action of the concrete ring beam. So when we have the tower in compression, the the whole concrete ring beam is going to be in tension, making sure everything is tied together. So that's a little bit about when you, again, if you take your stick model from the first slide, try to push down at the from the top, all the individual concrete plinths would try to move away from each other, but the concrete ring beam is kind of tying that together. So I think that's all from me. So I'll now hand it over to Levi.
Thanks very much, Klaus. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, fine. My name is Levi Jensen, and I'm representing the main contractor. I would like to give you a short presentation of the construction works of this forest tower. Well, this is just to show a little bit about the number of elements. Based on this detailed design from the consultants, we planned and executed the tower, including the foundation works. The execution was done in principle in 4 phases, being the foundation works, the fabrication of the main parabolic structure, the fabrication of the walkway structure, and the erection works. The foundation consists of the foundation piles and a concrete ring beam on top of the piles placed below the ground surface. On top of the ring beam are placed 18 concrete supports, concrete cones with the top over the ground surface. The foundation as such did not give us any special challenges apart from a bit of strong pile driving. The main structure, I could just show the pictures of this is a picture where we have started to excavate what is needed to do the foundation works. There you see the top of the piles, and again, well, this is the foundation works, including the work with the ring beam. And there you see the top of the piles, and there you see the reinforcement inside the concrete supports, inside the concrete cones. Well, the main structure, meaning the parabolic structure with a height of 45 meters, was divided into 4 times 18 elements, in total 72 fabrication elements. 18 elements for the level from 0 to 15, 18 elements from level 15 to 30, 18 elements from 30 to 45, and 18 top ring elements. The elements are all fabricated in the steel company JVP in Stettin in Poland. The sizes of the elements are planned for normal lorry transport from the factory to the site. And this is exactly what you see on this picture on the screen. Normal lorry transport with 1, perhaps 2 elements on the way to the site. There you also see one element lying on the ground, ready for erection. I will come back to these timber bird cases a little bit later. But this is the erection work ongoing. Further and apart from the main structure, there are fabricated 168 walkway elements in various sizes. With the actual geometry, with a constant slope and varying radius, all the 168 elements are geometrically different. As such, the work with the workshop drawings was comprehensive. The walkway elements were also fabricated by JVP in Poland and transported with lorries to the site. Before the elements were erected, the wood covering were pre-erected with the highest, or to the highest possible extent. And then the erection work. We analyzed different erection methods and based on that created the final erection method statement. Our final conclusion was to construct a center-placed erection tower with a size of 9 by 9 meters in plan to allow for the 3 existing trees to stay, which the owner wanted to save and be part of the visit experience in the tower. This is completely traditional steel structure. You see the columns here of this temporary structure. And you can also see the 3 existing trees inside the temporary tower. The idea, the function of the erection tower was to create a temporary horizontal support for the main structure elements and to give access to the levels where we have to do the erection works. In 9 levels, try to see, yeah. In 9 levels, we constructed access platforms to the main structure. This was for the erection works and as well for the welding works. Before the erection and position of the main elements, we did the needed surveying and temporary support elements were placed correctly in order to control the overall geometry. These, from there you see the main steel structure temporary tower, and then we are on the way to do simple platforms in timber to do the access platforms. After the main structure was erected and welded, in order to work with the welding on site, the erection welding, we constructed some simple small wooden boxes, what we called bird boxes, for the welders to be protected and to be able, to protect the welding from wind and so on, and also to be able to walk around the welding positions. It was simple elements which were very easy to move from one welding site or welding position to another. There you see the first part of the erection being the 18 element from 0 to 15. Again, a picture, showing both erected elements, temporary tower, and also our bird cases, as we call them. We realized that the way we have done the erection, we believe that it was a good and right way to do it. We analyzed several other possibilities. There you see. The walkway elements were, after we had the main structure erected and welded, the temporary erection tower was disassembled and moved away through the tower top. And after that, we went to erect the walkway elements from bottom to the top, using some smaller truck cranes for the lowest level, and in actual fact operating inside the tower, and using a bigger crane for the upper placed elements operating from the top. There you see more or less the final result. Safety, just to mention about that. Our erection method was developed and planned carefully with great attention to the safety issues, of course. We paid great attention to fall down of materials and tools, and as a consequence of that, the inside part of the tower was blocked from access during the erection period. We presented our erection method to the Danish safety authorities at an early stage and had a good relation and cooperation with the authorities during the erection period. We had no accidents. And this was the final picture. The construction time from signing the contract with the Camp Adventure, with the owner, we used almost 14 months to finalize and to hand over the project. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all four presenters. That was really excellent, really exciting, and a good presentation. And I think you gave us a lot of details about the project from the early ideas and until the construction has been completed. However, even though there were a lot of details in the presentation, I'm sure there will also be lots of questions from the audience. And I would suggest that when you ask a question, perhaps if you could just introduce yourself first, your name and your company, where you're coming from, and then please ask your question to the presenter, and maybe indicate who of the presenters you would like to respond to your question. So with this, we open the floor and invite for questions.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, Anand, please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Anand. I am a senior structural engineer from Kovi, Chennai, from India. It was really a great presentation, and hats off to you guys, and really good work done. I just wanted to know that which software you have used for this analysis.
I guess that's for me. Hi, Anand. So we are using our internal structural software in Arab, which is called GSA. We've used that for detailed design and everything, basically GSA, everything, right? From the GSA. So everything from the grasshopper model was then moved into GSA during the detailed design and as a visibility studies and footfall analysis and buckling studies as well.
Okay, so that is special software for timber structures, or
it's a steel structure, so
okay, yeah,
yeah.
So it can be used for both.
It's like, so it's the tower is a steel structure, so the.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Anand. Other comments or questions from the audience? Please either raise your hand or simply unmute. Everything seems very clear. Then perhaps I could ask a question. Levi, you showed the sort of the side wells and the protection cages that you had built sort of to protect both the wells and the welders during the construction. I mean, can you explain a bit more about the side well? How long did it take to complete one of these big joints, for instance, and the quality of the wells and checking of the wells afterwards?
Yeah, in actual fact, the wells are simply fillet wells, but of course in a little bit bigger size, and the different welding was in size different. But I would say, as a quick guess, almost 1 day to finalize one connection, not more than that. So it was in even there were a lot of welding, it was rather simple to weld it. And in actual fact, this company from Poland who fabricated the whole structure, all the elements, we took them also to the site for the site welding, because they had, of course, the experience, and they also had the certification to weld these weathering steel. So I would say that we feared a little bit from the very beginning the welding, the extent of the welding, but finally we realized that it was not so much. We had more or less, when we were welding in different periods, we had 6 welders on site, and they stayed for, let's say, a month or something like that every time. But the overall number of hours for welding, I have to be honest that I do not remember it at the moment.
Thank you very much, Levi.
As such, as we were talking about fillet wells, the NDT control was also rather simple.
Can I ask Sten Using from Covi? The cross plates you have at all these joints, I assume they would have been Z steel, or how was that?
Perhaps Klaus can participate in answering that question. As far as I remember, there were also set steel, correct, but not all of it.
Okay, yeah, I would have guessed. The welding process, what was that? Was that stick electrodes, flux cord arc wire, or how was that performed? Or solid wire?
No, not solid wire. It was, what is it called?
Big electrode, or flux cord arc wire, or stick electrodes?
No, it was the flux wire.
Flux cord.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Andrew Martin.
Hi, Andrew Martin from Covi here. I wonder if you could say, maybe both from the design and from the construction point of view, I imagine there must have been very tight tolerances and geometrical control required for the prefabrication, and also from the work on site. I wondered if you could just tell us a little about that and whether you had any difficulties when you got to site.
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, we were very clear from the very beginning that the tolerances in the prefabrication was very, very important. But I would say our fabricator in Poland managed from the very beginning to make a setup in the workshop to really control the geometry. But even that, I have to admit that we had on site also some challenges about the geometry, absolutely. So there were, we had to modify a little bit here and there, but overall, well, it was not so difficult. But of course, to control, I would say that the most important was really to control it in the workshop, and it was done. And I don't know if that gives you the full answer of that.
Andrew, any follow-up questions, or did that answer your query?
If I could be candid, Leroy, thank you for that. That's a very honest answer. I mean, I must say, from the position of having visited the tower, and it's an amazing structure, and it's visible in one or two places where you've perhaps experienced issues, but I think I would tend to comment that the fit of everything is remarkable all the way up. It looks a very good job.
Yeah.
And I think you're to be complimented on that.
Thanks.
Thanks for that comment, Andrew.
But I would say, on top of that, when you are working with, let's say, circular structures, the tolerances, it is you have to work with minus tolerances, not with plus tolerances. Then you create a problem. It's easier with a little bit of minus tolerances because you are more normally in a position to, let's say, solve that in the welding. But plus tolerances is very bad, which we also now and then experience. But if you have plus tolerances, then let's say the tower will grow a little bit, and then you create problems immediately. I don't know if you can follow me.
I think that was a good point, Levi.
Yeah.
Note taken. I think all the steel designers were participating. Any other questions? And I'll just support what Andrew said. We had a department picnic to visit the forest tower and also the high wire and then the climbing, and it is an amazing experience. So I can only encourage everybody to benefit from the corona restrictions being lifted and go and visit. It's really quite remarkable. And I think just to follow up on that, and this is perhaps a question to the owner, so to Kasper. I mean, now you have the project has received the IABSE special award, and I know that it has also been nominated to a number of other very prominent awards. So what does it mean for a project and for an organization like Camp Adventure to get this recognition from sort of organizations like IABSE and other organizations?
We are very, very happy and thrilled about it. I think what is interesting is that my background is as a city planner, so I'm not an engineer, but it's interesting to see that no matter what field it is, it's everybody is very impressed about it, because of course, like the knowledge that Levi and Klaus have is a kind of a knowledge I don't have. But so it's quite interesting that we can see we both get awards and recognitions from IABSE, but we also get some from the architecture, but we also for kind of tourism awards, and so we have kind of, no matter what field you're working in, it's been a very, very highly recognized attraction and piece of architecture. So it's a little bit interesting to as not to repeat myself again, but that no matter what field you're working in that is kind of related to the forest tower, then it has been very, very widely recognized. And one thing is kind of for professionals, but also in kind of in very broad media, like as I also said in the presentation, that Time magazine, this very, very big American media has recognized it as one of the 100 best places to visit in 2019. So it's both amongst like professionals in the construction business, it's amongst professionals in the tourism industry, it's amongst designers, and it's also amongst kind of the very broad public that has been recognized as something very remarkable. So that's I must be honest to say we didn't expect that in 2014 when we started up, but it's a very, of course, very flattering for all of us.
And it is well deserved.
Thank you.
I think we're sort of approaching the end of the time we had allocated. So if there are any sort of last minute questions or comments, Andrew?
I just think following on from what you said, Tina, but in general, an accolade to all of the design and the construction team. As certainly when our department made a visit, we're crawling all over it, looking to see how it was done, how it was delivered. Probably glad that we didn't have to think too hard about doing it ourselves. So I think it's a very deserved accolade to the whole team on a job that looks very well done.
So on that note, I would also congratulate the entire team on a job really well done, right from the ideas and the concept design, the architect and the ideas, and all the work that has put into creating such a remarkable structure. The structure engineer and the construction, I mean, it is remarkable, and the team deserves all our respect. So with those words, I would also thank you very much for giving a really interesting presentation today.